Imagine a devoted mother gifting her son a $180,000 condo, only for him to hand her a nursing home brochure and demand she sell her family home to fund his extravagant wedding. What Eileen O'Malley did next at the reception will make your jaw drop. Stay tuned for this shocking tale of betrayal and justice. Thanks, Eliza, for this opportunity. I'm sharing my story to show that love doesn't mean sacrificing everything. It's about respect, and I'm done being taken for granted. Let's get into it. My name is Eileen O'Malley, and at 65, I've learned that the deepest wounds often come from those we love most. As I sit here now in my kitchen, running my fingers along the worn wooden table where my late husband Michael and I shared countless meals, I can still feel the weight of that terrible evening. My silver-white bob catches the morning light streaming through the windows of the home we built together 40 years ago, and I touch the simple locket at my throat, the one that holds Michael's picture on one side and our son Liam's baby photo on the other. This house on Maple Street isn't just four walls and a roof, it's the repository of our entire life together. Every scuff mark on the hardwood floors tells a story, like the gouge near the front door where 5-year-old Liam dragged his bicycle inside during a thunderstorm, the same spot where I taught him to tie his shoes on rainy Saturday mornings. The pencil marks on the doorframe track his growth from toddler to the 6'2" man he became. The kitchen island bears the stains from countless birthday cakes, homework sessions, and heart-to-heart conversations that stretched well past bedtime. When Michael passed 3 years ago after his battle with cancer, this house became more than my home. It became my sanctuary, my security, and my connection to the man I'd loved for 37 years. The mortgage was paid off decades ago, and the property value had climbed to nearly $300,000. It represented not just my shelter, but my independence, my legacy, and my peace of mind. On my modest Social Security income of $1,800 per month, this house was my financial security blanket, the difference between comfortable independence and uncertain vulnerability. Liam had always been our pride and joy. We'd saved every penny to send him to Northwestern for his business degree, and when he graduated and landed a position at a consulting firm downtown earning $75,000 annually, Michael and I made a decision that felt natural and right. We used a significant portion of our savings, $180,000, to purchase a beautiful one-bedroom condo in Lincoln Park. No strings attached, no expectations of repayment, just parents helping their child get a solid start in life. "It's what families do," Michael had said, signing the deed over to Liam. "We invest in our children's futures." For 5 years, Liam lived in that condo rent-free. 5 years of no housing costs while earning a substantial salary that had grown to $95,000. $5 years to build his savings, establish his credit, and prepare for his own future family. We'd done the math. Between rent savings of at least $2,000 per month and his salary, he should have been able to accumulate well over $200,000 in savings. When Liam announced his engagement to Jessica Whitmore 18 months ago, I was overjoyed. Jessica came from a prominent family. Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships, and her mother was active in Chicago's social scene. She was polished, articulate, and seemed to genuinely care for my son. At their engagement party, held at the exclusive Whitmore estate in Winnetka, I felt proud watching Liam navigate that world of wealth and privilege. "Your son is quite the catch," Jessica's mother, Patricia, had told me that evening, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light from the crystal chandelier. "We're so pleased he'll be joining our family." I'd smiled warmly, my green eyes bright with maternal pride. "He's a good boy. You've raised a lovely daughter as well." But as the wedding planning commenced, I began to notice troubling undercurrents. Every conversation seemed to revolve around money, not in the practical way of young couples budgeting for their future, but in a way that felt grasping and calculating. Whenever wedding costs came up, Liam would grow quiet, deflecting questions about his contributions with vague comments about handling things behind the scenes. "Mom, this house is so big for just one person," Jessica would comment during their visits, her eyes appraising the crown molding and hardwood floors with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Liam would nod in agreement, avoiding eye contact with me. The real estate market is insane right now. You're sitting on a gold mine here. Have you thought about downsizing? I'd deflect with offers of tea or cookies, but their comments became more frequent and pointed. They'd discuss property values over dinner, mention how much easier a smaller place would be to maintain, and hint at the opportunities that selling could provide. The wedding planning itself became an exercise in excess that left me bewildered. The guest list swelled to 500 people, most of whom I'd never met. The venue was the historic Blackstone Hotel's grand ballroom, with a price tag that made my head spin. The flowers alone, white orchids and roses imported from Ecuador, cost $50,000, more than I'd spent on my entire wedding to Michael. It's important to make the right impression, Jessica explained when I gently questioned the extravagance. Daddy's business associates will be there, and Liam's career could really benefit from the networking opportunities. Everything was about image, about brand building, about making connections. The love story I'd hoped to celebrate seemed lost in the maze of vendor meetings and social climbing. But I told myself this was just how wealthy families operated. I was a simple Irish-American woman who'd married her high school sweetheart and lived a modest, comfortable life. Perhaps I simply didn't understand their world. That illusion shattered completely on the night of the rehearsal dinner. The rehearsal dinner was held at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, one of Chicago's most expensive restaurants, where a single steak costs more than my weekly grocery budget. The private dining room could easily accommodate the 40-member wedding party and immediate family, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. Crystal glasses caught the light from elaborate floral centerpieces, and the menu featured Wagyu beef and lobster that cost $150 per person, more than I typically spent on groceries in a week. I wore my best navy dress and pearl earrings, the ones Michael had given me for our 20th anniversary. My silver-white hair was styled in its usual elegant bob, and I'd taken extra care with my makeup, wanting to look my best for this celebration of my son's happiness. The Whitmores held court at one end of the long table, regaling the gathered guests with stories of their recent European vacation and their plans for a new yacht. Patricia wore a dress that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, and her husband Frank commanded attention with his booming voice and expensive suit. "We spared no expense for our little princess," Frank announced during his toast, his arm around Jessica's shoulders. "This wedding is going to be the event of the season. Nothing but the best for the future Mrs. O'Malley. Every detail has been perfect, from the $100,000 venue upgrade to the $75,000 catering enhancement." The assembled guests applauded, and I smiled, though something in Frank's tone struck me as odd. There was an emphasis on "we spared no expense" that seemed pointed, almost territorial. I glanced at Liam, expecting to see gratitude or perhaps embarrassment at Frank's public accounting of costs, but instead saw something that chilled me: relief. Liam sat beside Jessica, looking handsome in his tailored suit, but I noticed he seemed subdued. When others spoke about the wedding plans, he nodded along but rarely contributed specifics. When Frank mentioned costs or arrangements, Liam's jaw would tighten almost imperceptibly, and he'd reach for his wine glass. As the evening progressed and the wine flowed, conversations became more animated. I found myself seated between Liam's college roommate and one of Jessica's bridesmaids, both of whom seemed lovely but clearly moved in circles far more affluent than mine. "It must be so exciting to see your son marrying into such a successful family," the bridesmaid, Madison, commented. "The Whitmores really know how to throw a party." I nodded politely. They've been very generous with the wedding planning. "Oh, are they paying for everything?" she asked, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I heard the budget is astronomical." Before I could respond, she was pulled into another conversation, but her words lingered in my mind. Were the Whitmores paying for everything? I'd assumed Liam was contributing substantially, given his years of rent-free living and steady income. As dinner wound down and people began moving around the room, mingling and taking photos, Liam approached my chair. His expression was serious, almost businesslike, and he carried a manila folder that seemed out of place in the festive atmosphere. In that moment, watching him walk toward me with such calculated purpose, I was reminded of the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from this very spot in our backyard, declaring them the most beautiful flowers in the world. "Mom, can we talk for a minute?" he asked, pulling up the chair beside me. My heart warmed at the prospect of a private moment with my son. Perhaps he wanted to share his feelings about the wedding, or thank me for supporting him through the years, or maybe even acknowledge the sacrifices Michael and I had made for his education and his condo. I turned to face him fully, my green eyes bright with maternal affection. "Of course, sweetheart, what's on your mind?" Instead of the heartfelt conversation I expected, Liam opened the manila folder and withdrew a glossy brochure. He placed it deliberately on my bread plate, right next to my untouched dinner roll, covering the elegant place card that read Mrs. Eileen O'Malley, mother of the groom. The cover featured smiling seniors in matching polo shirts playing bocce ball on a perfectly manicured lawn. Above them, in cheerful blue script, were the words, "Golden Meadows Senior Living Community." My breath caught in my throat. The noise of the restaurant, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversations, the soft jazz playing in the background seemed to fade into a distant hum. Around us, the rehearsal dinner continued, but I felt as if I'd been transported to another dimension. "What is this, Liam?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed in a way that felt coldly casual. "It's a solution, Mom. Jessica and I have been running the numbers, and we're in a bit of a bind." My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the brochure. The paper felt expensive, the kind of marketing material designed to make institutional living seem like a luxury resort. Inside were photos of spacious one-bedroom apartments, communal dining areas, and activity rooms filled with silver-haired residents engaged in various hobbies. The starting cost was listed as $150,000 for a premium unit. "I don't understand," I said, though a terrible clarity was beginning to dawn. Liam's voice took on the tone he used at work, professional, persuasive, slightly condescending. "The wedding is running about $300,000 over what Frank and Patricia budgeted. They've been incredibly generous, but there are limits to what they can cover. The venue upgrade, the additional guests, the enhanced catering package, it all adds up." I stared at him, this man who had once been the baby in my locket, the child who used to help me plant tulip bulbs in our front yard every fall, trying to process what he was saying. "And you think I should?" "Sell the house," he finished matter-of-factly. "Mom, you're rattling around in that big place all by yourself. It's too much house for one person, and honestly, the maintenance costs are only going to increase as you get older. Golden Meadows is a beautiful community. They have activities, meal plans, medical staff on site. You'd be much safer there." He gestured toward the brochure as if he were presenting a business proposal. "Think about it. No more worrying about the furnace breaking or the roof leaking. No more shoveling snow or maintaining that big yard." The words hit me like physical blows. I felt dizzy, disoriented, as if the ground beneath my feet had suddenly shifted. "You want me to sell my home, our family home, to pay for your wedding?" "Not just the wedding," Liam said quickly, as if that made it better. "Think about your future, Mom. What happens if you fall down those stairs? What if the furnace breaks in the middle of winter and you can't afford to replace it? At Golden Meadows, all of that is taken care of." His voice grew more animated, more persuasive. "You could make friends your own age, participate in activities designed for seniors. It's really the smart choice." I looked around the room at the celebration continuing around us. Jessica was posing for photos with her bridesmaids, all of them young and beautiful and blissfully unaware that my entire world was crumbling. Frank was telling another story about his business success, gesturing expansively with a crystal tumbler of expensive whiskey. "How much?" I asked quietly. "How much what?" "How much would I get for the house?" Liam's eyes lit up, mistaking my question for interest rather than the desperate attempt to understand the magnitude of his betrayal that it actually was. "We had it appraised informally. In the current market, you could easily get $300,000, maybe more. After you pay for your spot at Golden Meadows, and they have a lovely one-bedroom unit available for $150,000 up front, you'd still have money left over for your care and expenses." I studied his face, searching for any sign of the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he had nightmares, who cried when he accidentally stepped on a butterfly, who told me I was the best mom in the world when I surprised him with homemade cookies after school. That child was nowhere to be found in the calculating stranger sitting beside me. "You've already looked at apartments for me?" I asked. "We wanted to be thorough," he said, pulling out another brochure from the folder. "This is the floor plan for the unit we have in mind. It has a nice view of the garden, and there's a community room where you could meet other residents your age. They even have a book club that meets on Thursdays." Other residents my age. Book clubs on Thursdays. As if 65 made me decrepit and ready for institutional care. As if the home where I'd raised him, loved his father, and built a lifetime of memories was just an inconvenient asset to be liquidated for better wedding flowers. I closed the brochures carefully and placed them back on the table. My hands were steady now, my voice calm. "Thank you for thinking of my future, dear." Liam smiled, clearly relieved by what he interpreted as acquiescence. "I knew you'd understand, Mom. You've always been so practical. And honestly, this takes a huge weight off our shoulders. Jessica has been so stressed about the budget overruns." I nodded slowly, my green eyes never leaving his face. "I can see how that would be stressful." "So you'll call the realtor this week?" he pressed. "We really need to get the ball rolling if we're going to have the funds available for the final payments." "I'll take care of everything," I assured him, my voice steady and calm. Liam leaned over and kissed my cheek, the gesture feeling like a betrayal in itself. "You're the best, Mom. Jessica is going to be so relieved." As he walked away to rejoin his fiancée, I sat alone at the table, the brochures still lying beside my untouched bread roll. Around me, the celebration continued. Laughter, clinking glasses, the flash of cameras capturing moments of joy that felt as foreign to me as if I were watching a movie. I picked up my wine glass with a steady hand and took a small sip, my mind already working. If my son wanted to treat me like a business transaction, then perhaps it was time I started thinking like a businesswoman too. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Michael's old armchair in our living room, still wearing my navy dress from the rehearsal dinner, watching the shadows shift across the walls as cars passed on Maple Street. The Golden Meadows brochures lay spread across the coffee table like evidence in a crime scene, their glossy surfaces reflecting the light from the table lamp. Every time I looked at them, I felt a fresh wave of disbelief and betrayal. By dawn, my shock had crystallized into something harder and more focused. I made coffee in the kitchen where Michael and I had shared thousands of mornings, where Liam had eaten countless bowls of cereal before school, where I'd celebrated every milestone and weathered every storm of our family life. The familiar ritual grounded me, helped me think clearly about what had just happened and what I needed to understand before deciding how to respond. My son had handed me an eviction notice disguised as a gift. He wanted me to liquidate my life's work, my security, my memories, all so he could have a more elaborate wedding party. But there were pieces of this puzzle that didn't fit, questions that needed answers before I decided how to respond. I started with what I could verify immediately. I called my neighbor, Margaret Chen, who worked as a real estate agent. Margaret had lived across the street for 15 years, and we developed a friendship built on borrowed cups of sugar and shared concerns about the neighborhood. "Eileen, honey, what is you calling so early?" Margaret's voice was warm but alert. It was barely 7 a.m. "I need some information about my house's value," I said, getting straight to the point. "Hypothetically, if I were to sell, what might it be worth in today's market?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. "That's a big hypothetical. Are you thinking of downsizing?" "Just exploring options," I said carefully. "Could you give me a rough estimate?" "Well, your place is in excellent condition, great neighborhood, and the market is strong right now. I'd say somewhere between $275,000 and $310,000, depending on how quickly you wanted to sell and what the inspection revealed." So Liam's informal appraisal was accurate. That was one piece of truth in what I was beginning to suspect was a web of deception. "Margaret, have you heard anything about the Whitmore family? Frank Whitmore owns car dealerships." "Oh sure, big name in Chicago business circles. Why do you ask?" "Liam is marrying their daughter. I'm just trying to understand their world better." Margaret's tone shifted slightly. "Well, they certainly live large. That house in Winnetka is gorgeous, must be worth $2 million easy. But what? There were some rumors a while back. Nothing concrete, you understand, but some of Frank's business associates were concerned about overextension. The car business has been tough the last few years, especially for luxury dealers. Could just be gossip, though. I thanked Margaret and hung up, my mind racing. If the Whitmores were having financial difficulties, that might explain why they needed Liam to contribute more to the wedding costs. But it didn't explain why Liam couldn't contribute anything at all. My next call was to my bank. I'd been managing my own finances since Michael's death, and I had a good relationship with my account manager, Sandra Williams. "Mrs. O'Malley, how nice to hear from you. How can I help you today?" "Sandra, I need to understand something about property transfers. If someone owns a condo outright, no mortgage, and they wanted to sell it, how long would that process typically take?" "Are you thinking of selling your house?" Sandra asked, concern evident in her voice. "No, this is about property my son owns. I'm just trying to understand his options." "Well, if there's no mortgage to deal with, and the property is in good condition, he could probably sell within 30 to 60 days in this market. Condos in good neighborhoods are moving quickly. What area are we talking about?" "Lincoln Park, 1 bedroom, about 1,200 square feet." Sandra whistled softly. "That's prime real estate. He could probably get $200,000 or more, especially if it's been well maintained." My heart sank. The condo we'd bought for $180,005 years ago was now worth at least $200,000. If Liam sold it, he'd have enough money to cover the wedding costs and then some. So why was he demanding that I sell my house instead? The answer came to me with horrible clarity, because he didn't want to give up his asset. He wanted to keep the condo and have me sacrifice my home instead. I spent the rest of the morning making discreet inquiries. I called my insurance agent, my accountant, even the property tax office. By noon, I had a clear picture of my financial situation and my options. I also had a growing understanding of just how calculated and cold-blooded my son's request had been. The phone rang just after lunch. It was Jessica. "Mrs. O'Malley, I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "I just wanted to thank you for being so understanding about the housing situation. Liam told me you're excited about Golden Meadows." I gripped the phone tighter. "Did he?" "Oh yes, he said you thought it was a wonderful solution. I have to tell you, I was so worried about asking. I know how attached people can become to their homes, especially at your age. But Liam assured me you'd see the practical benefits." At my age, as if 65 made me senile and unable to make rational decisions. "Jessica, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Exactly how much are your parents contributing to the wedding?" There was a pause. "Well, Daddy is covering the venue, catering, and flowers. Mommy is handling my dress and the photography. Why do you ask?" "And what is Liam contributing?" Another pause, longer this time. "Well, we're handling some of the other expenses together. The honeymoon, some of the smaller vendors. But no major expenses." "Mrs. O'Malley, is everything all right? You sound upset." I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of the situation. Jessica genuinely didn't know that Liam had no money to contribute. She thought they were partners in this financial arrangement, when in reality, her parents were paying for everything while my son planned to fund his portion with my life's work. "I'm fine, dear, just trying to understand all the moving pieces." "Well, I should let you go. I'm sure you have lots to do with the house preparations. Liam said you might list it as early as next week." After I hung up, I sat in Michael's chair again, this time in broad daylight. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the family photos on the mantelpiece, the books Michael and I had collected over the years, the small treasures that made this house our home. Liam had not only betrayed me, he'd lied to his fiancée about his financial situation. He was willing to let her parents pay for everything while he preserved his own assets. And he was so confident in his manipulation that he'd already told Jessica I was excited about selling. The anger that had been building since last night finally crystallized into something sharper and more focused. This wasn't just about money or real estate. This was about respect, about honesty, about the fundamental values I thought I'd raised my son to embrace. I touched my locket, feeling the outlines of Michael's photo and baby Liam's picture through the silver. Michael had always said that character was revealed not in good times, but in moments of pressure and temptation. Well, Liam's character was now crystal clear. But mine was about to be revealed too. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago, but never expected to use in this context. Peterson and Associates Legal Services, this is Amanda speaking. I'd like to schedule a consultation with Mr. Peterson, please. It's regarding a property matter. Certainly, what type of property matter? I looked around my living room, at the home that held 40 years of my life, at the place where I'd loved and been loved, where I'd raised my child and mourned my husband. Eviction, I said clearly. I need to discuss an eviction. James Peterson had been Michael's attorney for years, handling everything from our wills to the property purchase for Liam's condo. He was in his 70s now, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for both discretion and thorough preparation. His office overlooked Grant Park, and I sat in the familiar leather chair across from his mahogany desk, my hands folded in my lap. "Eileen, I have to say I was surprised by your call," he said, leaning back in his chair. "When you mentioned eviction, I assumed you were having trouble with a tenant." "In a way, I am." I explained the situation methodically, showing him the Golden Meadows brochures, detailing Liam's request, and outlining what I'd discovered about his actual financial position. James listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents I'd brought. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said finally. "You purchased a condo for your son 5 years ago, deed in his name, no mortgage, no rental agreement or lease between you." "That's correct, it was a gift." "And now he's asking you to sell your primary residence to fund his wedding expenses, while he retains ownership of an asset worth approximately $200,000. "Yes." James removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Eileen, I've been practicing law for 45 years, and I've seen a lot of family disputes over money. But this," he shook his head, "this is particularly calculating." "What are my options?" "Well, legally speaking, since the condo is in his name, it's his property. You can't force him to sell it. But," he paused, putting his glasses back on, "there are other considerations here. In Illinois, we have established precedent for what's called constructive eviction in family property situations. You mentioned he's been living there rent-free for 5 years. "Yes." "And you have records of the purchase, the deed transfer, your intentions at the time." "Everything is documented." James leaned forward. "Here's what I'm thinking. While you can't force him to sell the condo, you can certainly make his current living situation less comfortable. Under Illinois property law, if he's been living there as your guest, essentially, rather than as a tenant with rights, and if that arrangement was based on familial goodwill that he's now violated, then yes, you could pursue an eviction based on breach of the implied family covenant. Even though the deed is in his name. The deed establishes ownership, but not necessarily the right to occupy without consequences. Illinois courts have recognized that family property gifts can carry implicit conditions of mutual respect and support. If you can demonstrate that his residence there was contingent on family relationships and mutual respect, relationships he's now violated by demanding you sacrifice your security for his benefit, a case could be made. I felt a spark of hope. How would that work? We'd need to establish that his occupancy was based on an implied agreement of family support and respect. By demanding you liquidate your primary residence for his benefit, he's violated the spirit of that agreement. The Illinois Residential Property Act allows for eviction in cases where the occupant has fundamentally breached the conditions under which occupancy was granted. It's not a slam dunk, but it's legally sound. How long would the process take? If we file properly and he doesn't contest it, 30 days under Illinois law. If he fights it, longer. But Eileen, James leaned back again. Are you sure this is the path you want to take? This will likely destroy your relationship with your son permanently. I thought about the baby in my locket, about the little boy who used to help me bake cookies and tell me about his day at school. Then, I thought about the cold stranger who'd handed me a brochure for a nursing home and expected me to sacrifice my security for his party. I think that relationship is already destroyed, I said quietly. He just hasn't realized it yet. James nodded slowly. Then let's discuss timing. When is the wedding? Saturday, 4 days from now. And when would you want the eviction to take effect? I considered this carefully. I didn't want to ruin the wedding itself. Despite everything, I wasn't cruel. But I wanted Liam to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people as disposable assets and expect them to simply accept it. They're going to Bora Bora for their honeymoon, I said. 2 weeks. I'd like the locks changed while they're gone, with the eviction notice posted when they return. That's poetic, James said with a slight smile. And legally sound. We can have the paperwork filed tomorrow, served on Friday, and executed while he's out of the country. What about my speech at the wedding? James raised an eyebrow. What about it? I'm supposed to give a toast during the reception, as the mother of the groom. I see, and you're thinking. I'm thinking that, if Liam wants to make our private family business into a financial transaction, then perhaps our private family business should become public knowledge. James was quiet for a moment. Eileen, I have to ask, are you sure you want to do this? Once you give that speech, there's no taking it back. I touched my locket, feeling the familiar weight of the photos inside. James, I've spent 40 years in that house. I raised my son there, loved my husband there, buried my husband from there. It's not just property to me, it's my life's work, my security, my connection to everything I hold dear. And my son wants me to sell it so he can have better wedding flowers. When you put it that way. I'm 65 years old. I'm not ancient, I'm not senile, and I'm not helpless. I deserve better than to be discarded like an inconvenient piece of furniture. James made a note on his pad. What exactly do you want to say in this speech? I'd been thinking about this since yesterday, and the words had been forming in my mind with crystalline clarity. I want to tell the truth. About the condo, about his financial situation, about why Jessica's parents are paying for everything, and I want to announce the eviction. In front of 500 people. In front of 500 people. James leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You know, in 45 years of practice, I've never had a client deliver an eviction notice during a wedding toast. There's a first time for everything. He picked up his pen. All right then, let's make this legal and bulletproof. If you're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We spent the next 2 hours going over every detail. James would file the eviction papers on Thursday under Illinois Property Code Section 735, have them served on Friday morning before the wedding, and arrange for a locksmith to change the condo's locks the following Monday while Liam and Jessica were on their honeymoon. The eviction notice would be posted on the door when they returned, giving Liam 30 days to remove his belongings. One more thing, James said as I prepared to leave. Are you prepared for the fallout? This is going to create a significant scene. I thought about the rehearsal dinner, about Liam's casual dismissal of my feelings, about Jessica's assumption that people my age were naturally ready for institutional care. James, I've been preparing for this my whole life. I just didn't know it. As I walked out of his office into the Chicago afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Michael's death, a sense of purpose and control. For months, I'd been drifting, letting life happen to me rather than actively shaping it. But Liam's betrayal had awakened something in me, a fierce determination to protect what was mine and demand the respect I deserved. The wedding was in 3 days. I had preparations to make. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of brilliant October sunshine that makes Chicago's skyline sparkle like crystal. I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the maple tree in my front yard that had turned a gorgeous shade of gold. It was the same tree Michael and I had planted when Liam was 5, and watching it change with the seasons had become one of my small daily pleasures. I'd slept surprisingly well, considering what lay ahead. Perhaps it was the clarity that comes with making a difficult decision, or maybe it was simply the relief of finally taking action after days of planning and preparation. My dress hung on the closet door, a sophisticated emerald green silk that complemented my eyes and silver white hair. I'd chosen it specifically for today, wanting to look elegant and dignified for what would likely be the most important speech of my life. My grandmother's pearl earrings lay on the dresser beside my locket, and I'd had my hair styled yesterday at the salon where I'd been going for 15 years. The morning passed quietly. I had coffee and toast in my kitchen, reading the newspaper and trying to maintain my normal routine. At 10 a.m., my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a young man in a suit holding an official-looking envelope. "Mrs. O'Malley, I have a delivery for you." I signed for the papers, knowing exactly what they were. James had been as good as his word. The eviction notice had been served to Liam at the condo yesterday morning, just as he'd promised. By now, Liam would have received the legal documents, though he probably hadn't had time to process what they meant or consult an attorney. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Liam was getting ready for his wedding, putting on his tuxedo and adjusting his boutonniere, he was also dealing with the reality that his mother had just legally evicted him from his home. I wondered if he'd told Jessica about the papers. I wondered if he'd connected them to our conversation at the rehearsal dinner. Most likely, he was assuming this was some kind of mistake or bureaucratic error that could be resolved after the honeymoon. He was about to learn otherwise. At noon, I began getting ready. I took my time with my makeup, applied my lipstick carefully, and arranged my silver-white bob until it looked perfect. When I put on my emerald dress, I felt transformed, not into someone else, but into the strongest version of myself. The locket went on last. I opened it briefly, looking at Michael's handsome young face and baby Liam's innocent smile. Then I closed it and tucked it beneath my dress, where I could feel its familiar weight against my heart. My phone rang at 1 p.m. It was Liam. "Mom, I got some weird legal papers yesterday. Something about eviction. I think there's been a mistake." His voice was stressed but still dismissive, as if this were simply an administrative error that would resolve itself. "No mistake, sweetheart," I said calmly. There was a long pause. "What do you mean, no mistake?" "I mean exactly what the papers say. You have 30 days to vacate the condo." "Mom, what the hell is going on? I'm getting married in 4 hours." "Yes, you are, and I'll be there to celebrate with you." "You can't evict me from my own property." "Actually, I can. You should read the documents more carefully. Illinois Property Code Section 735 allows for eviction when the conditions of occupancy have been fundamentally breached. And perhaps you should have thought about the consequences before you handed me that nursing home brochure." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more calculating. "This is about the house, isn't it? Mom, we can discuss this after the honeymoon. You're being irrational." Irrational? The word hit me like a slap. After everything, after 5 years of rent-free living, after demanding I sell my home, after treating me like a disposable asset, he was calling me irrational for defending myself. "We'll discuss it at the reception," I said pleasantly. "I'm looking forward to my speech." "Your speech?" "As mother of the groom, I'll be giving a toast. I have some lovely things to share about family and sacrifice and the true meaning of love." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "Mom, whatever you're thinking, don't do anything stupid." "Stupid?" I laughed, a sound that surprised me with its genuine amusement. "Oh, sweetheart, I haven't felt this smart in years." I hung up before he could respond. The wedding ceremony was scheduled for 3 p.m. at St. James Cathedral, followed by cocktails and dinner at the Blackstone Hotel. I arrived at the church precisely on time, wearing my emerald dress and carrying a small clutch that contained my speech notes, though I'd memorized every word. The cathedral was magnificent, decorated with thousands of white roses and baby's breath. The guest list of 500 filled every pew, and I recognized maybe 50 faces among the sea of strangers. Jessica's family and friends dominated the gathering, their expensive clothes and jewelry creating an atmosphere of wealth and privilege that felt foreign to me. I took my seat in the front row, designated for immediate family. Patricia Whitmore nodded to me from across the aisle, her smile bright and warm. She had no idea what was coming. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Jessica looked stunning in her designer gown, and Liam was handsome in his custom tuxedo. They exchanged vows about love and commitment and building a life together, words that should have moved me to tears, but instead felt hollow given what I now knew about my son's character. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation erupted in applause. I clapped politely, watching my son kiss his new bride, feeling like I was watching strangers perform a play. The receiving line after the ceremony was an exercise in social theater. Guest after guest congratulated the happy couple and made small talk about the beautiful ceremony and the lovely venue. When my turn came, Jessica hugged me warmly. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. O'Malley. I'm so excited to officially be part of your family." "Welcome to the family, dear," I said, meaning it more than she could possibly know. Liam's hug was tense, his smile forced. "We'll talk later," he murmured in my ear. "Yes," I agreed, "we certainly will." The cocktail hour at the Blackstone was elegant and sophisticated, with string quartet music and servers circulating with champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres. I mingled politely, making conversation with distant relatives and family friends, all while mentally rehearsing the speech that would change everything. At 6 p.m., the doors to the grand ballroom opened, revealing a space that took my breath away despite everything. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory silk, centerpieces of white orchids and roses reached toward the vaulted ceiling, and a dance floor gleamed like polished marble. The head table, where Liam and Jessica would sit with their wedding party, was positioned on a raised platform that commanded a view of the entire room. I found my assigned seat at table 3, surrounded by Michael's cousins and a few family friends. They were lovely people who remembered Michael fondly and treated me with warmth and respect. Under different circumstances, I would have enjoyed their company immensely. Dinner was served with military precision, multiple courses of expertly prepared food accompanied by carefully selected wines. The conversation at my table was pleasant, touching on family updates, travel plans, and fond memories of Michael. I participated when appropriate, but my mind was focused on what was coming. At 8:30, the DJ announced that the speeches would begin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now hear from the father of the bride, Mr. Frank Whitmore." Frank's speech was exactly what I'd expected, a rambling tribute to his perfect daughter and his wonderful new son-in-law, peppered with references to his business success and his family's generosity. He made several pointed comments about sparing no expense and giving our children the very best, each one landing like a small knife in my chest. The applause was enthusiastic, and Frank beamed as he returned to his seat. "Next, we'll hear from the mother of the groom, Mrs. Eileen O'Malley." This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for, the moment that would either vindicate my decision or destroy what remained of my relationship with my son forever. I stood up slowly, smoothing my emerald dress, and walked toward the small stage where a microphone waited. The ballroom fell silent except for the soft clink of glasses and the rustle of fabric as 500 people turned their attention to me. I looked out over the sea of faces, Jessica's family and friends, Liam's colleagues and college friends, distant relatives and business associates. At the head table, Jessica sat radiant in her wedding gown, her smile bright and expectant. Beside her, Liam watched me with barely concealed anxiety, his jaw tight with tension. I adjusted the microphone, the metal cool and solid in my hands. My green eyes swept across the crowd one more time before settling on my son's face. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I am Eileen O'Malley, Liam's mother. Thank you all for being here to celebrate this special day with our families." Polite applause rippled through the room. I waited for it to die down completely before continuing. There is a tradition at weddings of offering wisdom and blessings for the future. And I do have wisdom to share tonight, though perhaps not the kind you might expect. I paused, my fingers finding my locket through the silk of my dress. The weight of it grounded me, reminding me of the love that had built my life and the betrayal that had brought me to this moment. Love, I continued, is about building a life together. It's about the home you create, not just with bricks and mortar, but with shared sacrifice, mutual respect, and genuine partnership. Nods and murmurs of agreement came from the audience. At the head table, Jessica's smile remained bright, but I could see Liam's hands clenched in his lap. When Liam graduated from college and started his career, His father and I wanted to give him the best possible foundation for his future. So we made a decision that felt natural and right for parents who loved their child. We used a significant portion of our life savings, $180,000, to purchase a beautiful condominium in Lincoln Park for him to live in. The murmur in the room shifted slightly, becoming more attentive. Frank Whitmore's eyebrows rose with interest. I could see guests beginning to pull out their phones, sensing that this wasn't a typical mother-of-the-groom speech. For 5 years, Liam has lived in that condo completely rent-free. 5 years of no housing costs while earning a substantial salary in his consulting position. 5 years to build his savings, establish his financial foundation, and prepare for exactly this moment, starting a family with the woman he loves. I could see confused looks beginning to appear on faces throughout the room. This wasn't the typical mother-of-the-groom speech they were expecting. Several guests were now openly recording on their phones. Now, you might wonder why I'm sharing these financial details at such a celebration. It's because I believe in truth, and I believe that marriage should be built on honesty between partners and families. Jessica's smile was beginning to falter. At their table, Patricia Whitmore leaned forward slightly, her expression sharp with sudden attention. You see, 3 days ago at the rehearsal dinner, my son approached me with a problem. The wedding expenses had exceeded what Frank and Patricia had so generously budgeted. The venue upgrades, the additional guests, the enhanced catering, it had all added up to about $300,000 more than planned. The silence in the room was now complete. Even the servers had stopped moving. I could hear the distinctive sound of multiple phones recording, and I saw guests at tables throughout the ballroom leaning forward in their chairs. Liam presented me with a solution. He handed me a brochure for Golden Meadows Senior Living Community and suggested that I sell my house, the home his father and I built together, where I raised him, where I've lived for 40 years, to cover these additional wedding expenses. A collective intake of breath swept through the ballroom. I could see shock registering on face after face, and at the head table, Jessica had gone completely white. Someone near the back gasped audibly, and I heard a woman whisper, "Oh my God, did she just say what I think she said?" Now, you might think this was a reasonable request. After all, I am 65, and perhaps it's time for me to downsize. But here's what makes this particularly interesting. I turned slightly, making eye contact with Liam, whose face had gone ashen. The condominium we purchased for Liam 5 years ago is now worth approximately $200,000. If he sold it, he could easily cover the additional wedding expenses and still have money left over. But instead of liquidating his own asset, he chose to ask his mother to sacrifice hers. The murmur that ran through the crowd was no longer polite wedding conversation. It was the sound of 500 people processing a betrayal, and many of them were looking toward the head table with expressions ranging from confusion to disgust. I could see guests turning to each other, whispering urgently, pointing at Liam. Frank Whitmore's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Patricia sat frozen, her wine glass halfway to her lips. Jessica looked as if she might faint. But the story doesn't end there, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Because this morning, I learned something that I think Jessica and her family deserve to know. I turned to address Jessica directly, my voice gentle but clear. My dear, your parents have paid for this entire wedding. Every flower, those $50,000 worth of imported orchids and roses, every piece of crystal on these tables, every bite of the $100,000 enhanced catering menu, every note of music from that string quartet. Liam has contributed nothing, not because he couldn't, but because he chose not to. He preferred to preserve his own assets while asking others to sacrifice theirs. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. The sound that escaped her was half gasp, half sob. Around the room, I could hear exclamations of shock and outrage. "Are you kidding me?" someone called out from the back. "What kind of man does that to his own mother?" "I want to be very clear," I said, addressing the room again. "This is not about money. This is about character. This is about the difference between building a partnership and exploiting the people who love you." I could see wedding guests turning to each other, whispering urgently. Some looked angry, others appeared embarrassed to be witnessing such a public revelation. At the head table, the wedding party sat in stunned silence. One of the groomsmen had his mouth hanging open. "So, Liam," I said, looking directly at my son, "I have decided to give you a wedding gift after all. My gift is the one thing you seem to need most, a lesson in accountability." Liam started to stand, but I held up my hand. The gesture was so commanding that he actually sat back down. "While you and Jessica are enjoying your honeymoon in Bora Bora, which I'm sure Frank and Patricia are also paying for, the locks on your condominium will be changed. The eviction notice you received yesterday is not a mistake or a misunderstanding. It is my response to your demand that I sell my home for your party." The ballroom erupted. Gasps, exclamations, and the scraping of chairs as people turned to get better views of the unfolding drama filled the air. At the head table, Jessica was crying openly, and Liam had gone from ashen to furious. The best man was trying to comfort Jessica while glaring at Liam. "You have 30 days to remove your belongings," I continued, my voice cutting through the noise. "I suggest you use that time to reflect on the difference between being given everything and earning anything." Frank Whitmore stood up abruptly, his face purple with rage. "This is outrageous. How dare you ruin our daughter's wedding with your family drama?" I turned to him with a calm smile. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm simply sharing the truth about what you've paid for. I thought you deserved to know exactly where your $300,000 went." Patricia had found her voice. "We had no idea. Jessica, honey, did you know about any of this?" Jessica shook her head wordlessly, tears streaming down her face. I thought he was paying for the honeymoon and some other things. He told me he was handling his share." The crowd was now in full uproar. I could see people recording everything on their phones, and I heard someone say, "This is going straight to TikTok." Another voice called out, "Good for you, lady. My mother would have done the same thing." I looked out over the crowd one final time. "I want to thank all of you for being here tonight to witness this celebration. Marriage is indeed about building a life together, about partnership and mutual respect. I hope the happy couple learns what those words actually mean." I placed the microphone back on its stand with a gentle click. The ballroom was in chaos, guests talking urgently among themselves, wedding party members trying to comfort a sobbing Jessica, and Frank Whitmore shouting something about lawyers and lawsuits. But I felt perfectly calm as I walked through the crowd toward the exit. People stepped aside to let me pass, some looking at me with shock, others with what appeared to be admiration. I heard scattered applause from various tables, and one elderly woman called out, "You're my hero." Near the door, I passed Margaret Chen, my real estate agent neighbor, who was apparently a guest of someone at the wedding. She caught my arm gently. "Eileen," she whispered, "that was the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed." I smiled at her. "Thank you, Margaret. I think Michael would have been proud." As I stepped out of the Blackstone Hotel into the cool October evening, I could still hear the commotion from the ballroom behind me. Through the windows, I could see the chaos continuing. Guests clustered in animated conversation, Jessica being comforted by her bridesmaids, and Liam standing alone at the head table, looking utterly defeated. I walked to my car with steady steps, my emerald dress rustling softly in the night air. As I drove home through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, I passed the houses where I'd lived my entire adult life. When I pulled into my driveway on Maple Street, I sat for a moment looking at my home, my sanctuary, my security, my connection to 40 years of love and memory. Inside, I made a cup of tea and sat in Michael's chair, still wearing my wedding dress. The house was quiet and peaceful, filled with the comfortable silence of a space that had sheltered a lifetime of joys and sorrows. My phone had been buzzing with calls and texts, but I ignored them all. There would be time for conversations and consequences tomorrow. Tonight, I simply wanted to sit in my home that I had defended and kept, and feel the satisfaction of a battle fought and won. The first week after the wedding passed in a whirlwind of phone calls, text messages, and unexpected visitors. I let most of the calls go to voicemail, screening them carefully before deciding whether to respond. The messages ranged from outraged family members demanding explanations to complete strangers who had somehow seen the wedding video online and wanted to express their support. Margaret had been right about the social media aspect. Someone at the wedding had posted the entire speech on TikTok, and it had gone viral within hours. By Monday morning, it had been shared over 500,000 times with comments like, "This is what standing up for yourself looks like," and "Every parent needs to see this." The hashtag nursing home brochure was trending, with people sharing their own stories of family financial manipulation. On Monday morning, I received a call from James Peterson. "Eileen, I've been practicing law for 45 years, and I've never had a client execute a legal strategy quite so dramatically. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, James. Better than fine, actually." "Good, because you should know that Liam has retained counsel. Harrison and Associates, they're going to challenge the eviction." I wasn't surprised. "What are our chances?" "Excellent, actually. The more I've reviewed the documentation, the stronger our position becomes." The condo was purchased as a gift with the clear expectation of family harmony and mutual respect. His demand that you liquidate your primary residence constitutes a material breach of the family relationship that made the gift possible. Plus, your speech provided 500 witnesses to his character and intentions. In plain English. James chuckled. In plain English, he can't take your generosity for granted and then demand more. The judge is going to see this exactly as we present it. A young man who received a substantial gift from his parents and then tried to manipulate his mother into funding his lifestyle. Tuesday brought an unexpected visitor. I was in my garden, tending to the late-season mums that Michael had always loved, when a car pulled into my driveway. I didn't recognize the silver Mercedes, but when the driver got out, I realized it was Patricia Whitmore. She looked older than she had at the wedding, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. Her designer handbag hung loosely from her shoulder, and her face bore the signs of someone who hadn't slept well in several days. "Mrs. O'Malley," she called as she approached my front porch, "could we talk?" I set down my gardening gloves and gestured to the wicker chairs on my porch. "Of course. Can I get you some coffee?" "Thank you, that would be lovely." I brought out 2 cups of coffee and settled into the chair across from her. Patricia seemed to be gathering her thoughts, staring out at the maple tree in my front yard. "I owe you an apology," she said finally, "and an explanation." "You don't owe me anything, Patricia." "Yes, I do." She turned to face me directly. "I had no idea about Liam's financial situation. Jessica never told us he wasn't contributing to the wedding costs because she didn't know either. She thought he was handling the honeymoon and some of the smaller expenses." I nodded, sipping my coffee. I suspected as much. Frank is furious, of course. He feels manipulated, and he's not wrong. We spent over $200,000 on that wedding, thinking we were helping 2 young people start their lives together. Instead, we were enabling one young man to avoid his responsibilities. "What about Jessica?" Patricia's face crumpled slightly. "She's devastated, not just about the money, but about what it says about the man she married. She's been asking herself what else she doesn't know about him. She's seen that viral video of your speech dozens of times, and each time she says she learned something new about the man she thought she knew." "I'm sorry about that, I truly am. I didn't want to hurt her." "I know you didn't. And frankly, it's better she learns this now than 5 years from now when they have children and a mortgage." Patricia paused. "She's staying with us for now. She says she needs time to think." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the autumn leaves drift down from the maple tree. "There's something else," Patricia said. "Frank has been doing some investigating into Liam's background, financial records, employment history, that sort of thing. And he's been living well beyond his means for years. The condo was just the beginning. He has credit card debt totaling over $50,000, a car loan he can barely afford, and he's been borrowing money from friends and colleagues. The wedding wasn't the only thing he couldn't pay for, it was just the biggest." This revelation hit me harder than I expected. My son wasn't just selfish, he was financially irresponsible in ways I'd never imagined. "Patricia, I appreciate you telling me this, but why are you here?" She smiled for the first time since arriving. "Because I wanted to thank you. What you did took incredible courage, and it saved my daughter from making an even bigger mistake. You could have stayed quiet, taken the easy path, and let someone else deal with the consequences. Instead, you stood up in front of 500 people and told the truth. I couldn't do that. I know, and that's why I respect you so much. She stood to leave, then paused. There's one more thing. Frank and I would like to help with your legal expenses. We know Liam has hired attorneys, and we don't want you to bear that financial burden alone. I was touched by the offer but shook my head. That's very generous, but I can handle it. James Peterson has been our family attorney for years, and he's confident about our position. The offer stands if you change your mind. After Patricia left, I called Margaret Chen to update her on the situation and to ask her professional opinion about the real estate market. Eileen, I have to tell you, your story has become the talk of the neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez from 3 houses down called me yesterday to say she's never been more proud to live on the same street as you. I laughed. I'm not sure that's the kind of fame I was looking for. Are you kidding? You're a hero to every woman who's ever been taken advantage of by her own family. I've had 3 calls from reporters wanting to talk to you, and someone from the Today Show reached out. Reporters. Apparently that wedding video has been shared millions of times now. There's a whole conversation happening online about elder financial abuse and family manipulation. You've started something bigger than just your own situation. The idea that my private family drama had become a public discussion was unsettling, but Margaret assured me that the response had been overwhelmingly supportive. On Wednesday, I received a call that surprised me more than any other. Mrs. O'Malley, this is Jessica. Could we meet somewhere and talk? We arranged to meet at a small cafe near Northwestern University, neutral territory that felt safe for both of us. Jessica looked fragile when she arrived, her usual polished appearance replaced by jeans and a simple sweater. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she seemed to have lost weight in just a few days. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she said as we settled into a corner booth. I wasn't sure you would. Jessica, you're not my enemy in this. You're as much a victim of Liam's deception as I am. She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed. The way he always let my parents pay for everything, how he never seemed to have money for anything substantial, the way he talked about your house like it was just an investment opportunity. You loved him. Love makes us blind to things we don't want to see. Did you know, she asked suddenly, when you were planning the wedding, did you know he was lying to me about his finances? I considered how to answer honestly without being cruel. I suspected something was wrong when he couldn't contribute anything to the wedding costs, but I didn't know the full extent of his financial problems until after your parents told me about their investigation. Jessica stared into her coffee cup. I feel so stupid and so embarrassed. 500 people watched our marriage implode on our wedding day. It's all over the internet now. My friends have been sending me the video with crying emojis. You have nothing to be embarrassed about. You entered that marriage in good faith, believing in honesty and partnership. The fact that Liam didn't share those values isn't a reflection on you. What should I do? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. I reached across the table and took her hand. Jessica, I can't tell you what to do about your marriage, but I can tell you this. The man who demanded I sell my home for his wedding party is not the same man you thought you were marrying. Whether that man still exists or can be recovered is something only you can determine. She squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry about what he asked you to do. It was unconscionable. When I saw that video and heard you describe what happened at the rehearsal dinner, I felt sick to my stomach. Thank you for saying that. Are you really going to evict him? Yes, the locks were changed on Monday. He has 30 days to retrieve his belongings. Jessica nodded slowly. Good, he needs to learn that actions have consequences. When we parted outside the cafe, Jessica hugged me tightly. Thank you for being honest with me. I know it cost you your relationship with Liam, and I'm sorry about that. Some relationships aren't worth preserving if they're built on lies and manipulation. The legal proceedings moved forward smoothly. Liam's attorneys tried several approaches, claiming the eviction was retaliatory, arguing that the condo ownership gave him unlimited occupancy rights, even suggesting that my age made me incompetent to make such decisions. James Peterson dismantled each argument with surgical precision, and by the end of the month, the eviction was upheld. Liam came to collect his belongings on a cold November morning. I watched from my living room window as he loaded boxes into a moving truck, his movements sharp with anger and frustration. He never knocked on my door, never attempted to have a conversation or offer an apology. When the truck pulled away, I felt a profound sense of closure. The baby in my locket was gone forever, replaced by a stranger who had chosen greed over love, manipulation over honesty. It was a loss I would mourn, but it was also a liberation. That evening, Margaret Chen called with news. "Eileen, I hope you don't mind, but I've been keeping track of your condo's market value. If Liam decides to sell, he could get $220,000 in the current market. That's good for him, I suppose." "It's more than good. It's enough to pay off all his debts and still have a substantial amount left over. Your eviction might be the best thing that ever happened to him financially." I considered this irony. In trying to force me to sacrifice my security, Liam had instead been forced to liquidate his own asset, which turned out to be exactly what he needed to solve his financial problems. "Margaret, do you think I did the right thing?" "Eileen O'Malley, you stood up to a bully who happened to be your own son. You protected your home, your security, and your dignity. You also probably saved a young woman from a marriage built on lies. If that's not doing the right thing, I don't know what is." 6 months later, I received a card in the mail. The return address was unfamiliar, but when I opened it, I recognized Jessica's handwriting. "Dear Mrs. O'Malley," it read, "I wanted you to know that I've filed for divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but after months of counseling and soul-searching, I realized that I can't build a life with someone I don't trust. You gave me the courage to demand honesty and respect in my relationships. Thank you for that gift. I hope you're well and happy in your beautiful home. With love and gratitude, Jessica. P.S. I saw you were featured in that article about elder advocacy. You're inspiring so many people." I placed the card on my mantelpiece, next to the photos of Michael and the baby Liam, who had once represented all my hopes for the future. Then I made a cup of tea and sat in Michael's chair, looking out at the maple tree that was just beginning to show its spring buds. At 65, I had learned something valuable. It's never too late to stand up for yourself, never too late to demand respect, and never too late to choose dignity over convenience. My house was still my sanctuary, my locket still held my most precious memories, and my future was still my own to shape. I touched the locket at my throat, feeling the familiar weight of love and loss, of memory and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight I was exactly where I belonged. In my own home, surrounded by my own choices, secure in the knowledge that I had fought for what mattered most and won. The woman who had been handed a nursing home brochure was gone forever. In her place sat someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who understood that love without respect is not love at all, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's worst impulses. I was 65 years old, and I had just begun to live on my own terms. It was, I thought with a smile, about time. Eileen O'Malley, your unyielding stand against your son's manipulation highlights that true family love requires mutual respect, not exploitation, and that defending your dignity can expose deeper truths. It's a universal wake-up call about the cost of entitlement in relationships. I'm Eliza Quinn, and remember, here on Wedding Day Justice, veils off, justice on.